Assalamu alaikum, family. You're tuned in to the Sajdah Morning Coffee Talks, and I'm your host, Sajdah Wendy Muhammad. We're going to get into it, and I'll be right back in a few minutes. Let me just adjust something here because looks like the light is a little too bright on my face, but I promise you, you all are going to enjoy this conversation today. So we'll be right back, and be a friend, tell a friend, and I'll see you in a few.
O Allah, guide me among those whom Thou hast guided aright, and preserve me among those whom Thou hast preserved, and befriend me among those whom Thou hast befriended. Bless me in whatsoever Thou dost grant me, and deliver me from the evil of what Thou hast judged. Surely Thou judgest, and none can judge against Thee, and he whom Thou befriendest is not disgraced. Blessed art Thou, O Lord, and exalted be Thee above what they set up besides Thee. I bear witness, nothing deserves to be served besides Thee, and I bear witness that Muhammad is Thy servant and apostle. Amen.
Assalamu alaikum, family. Welcome, welcome, and welcome. Thank you for tuning in. We got a powerful subject that I want to talk about over the course of the next couple of days. And the idea behind this conversation, forgive me while I'm just trying to adjust my visual effect here a little bit. The conversation the last couple of days has been really brewing in my mind now for a few years, to be honest with you. Um, Primarily because being a person that has spent time in the corporate world, um, somebody who understands how business and policy interacts. Now that I'm doing a lot of coaching, helping a lot of you all to do for self, to find your way and navigate your way into this world. And given the current climate and what's going on out there, a lot of people are starting to feel hopeless. Like, what do we do? What can we do? And I'm constantly saying we have an antidote. We've been given some solutions from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that I believe would be very helpful to us in this day and time. I'm sorry to be adjusting clothes and everything this morning. I just, I don't know, came here a little discombobulated today. While the intro was going, couldn't keep my scarf on and all of that. It's just all this powerful energy that's happening. All right, let's just dig into it. And I'm going to chop this up into some bite-sized snippets so that we can get it. And I'm also going to put an ebook out. I'm working on an ebook. I'm pulling together all my writings on the subject. And I think we'll do an ebook or maybe a small book on. And it's really just an extension of the art and science of business. A lot of the stuff that you'll hear today is in the book, and then some of it is not. Okay. I also want to remind you all before we get started, if you have a commemorative Elijah coin, go out there to the website and register it, because we have an announcement that's coming first to coin holders, and you're going to have to be a registered coin holder to get it first. And then the other coin holders who have not registered will get it second, and then we'll go on from there. But okay, let's dig into this. I want to talk about how to change policy when there is heavy corporate influence. I just think that we go about things in the wrong way. So let's dig into it. Reclaiming democratic power through structural participation, economic strategy, and community governance is what I've called this body of work that I've been given. I've been, given my time to. What I'm going to give to you today is sort of like a executive summary type Cliff Notes version of the conversation. I don't know why our chat's looking a little weird today. Give me a thumbs up in the chat if you can see and hear and participate in the chat. It's looking a little, okay. There we go. Okay. There was Jimmy Carter. How many of you all know President Jimmy Carter? He made a statement that was interesting. He said, the citizen's job is to be the owner of the government, not the spectator of it. Reason why I say that's a powerful statement is because some of us kind of go, yeah, okay, I kind of know that intuitively, but not a lot of us actually do anything about it. In 2024 alone, we're talking about corporations, corporate lobbying expenditures in the United States were over $4 billion annually, meaning that corporations in the United States in 2024 spent over $4 billion lobbying to government officials to have their way, and when it comes to expanding their industry influence, healthcare, technology, energy, finance, defense, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, housing, media. While all of that's playing in the background, public trust in institutions or government institutions continues to decline. At the same time, small businesses struggle to compete against large consolidated entities, and ordinary citizens feel increasingly disconnected from the policy-making process. Because sometimes we feel like no matter what we do, certain things still happen. Modern policy making increasingly operates within systems shaped by concentrated corporate influence. Okay, we talked about it across industries: healthcare, housing, food systems, technology, media, energy, education, finance. Large institutions often possess disproportionate access to lawmakers, regulatory agencies, lobbying networks, campaign financing structures, and even public narratives. And that's important in today's social media world. There's public perception and public narratives that are put out there on social media through bots, through people they hire to just go out there and put a narrative out there. And then that narrative begins to influence how we vote, what we believe in, what we think is possible or impossible. It's why they say the internet is not real. That's the reason. That's one of the reasons. So as corporate consolidation expands, public policy can become less reflective of our community needs and more responsive to institutional profitability, shareholder pressure, and centralized economic interest. So this concentration of influence creates a growing imbalance between organized capital and organized systems. What happens when there's a disconnect between ordinary systems and the use of organized capital to influence government? You're going to have weakened labor protections. So when you're trying to fight for certain wage adjustments, that fight may be weakened. The concentration of wealth is going to shift or it's going to rise. So there will be pockets of wealth. Of course, the declining public trust, like we talked about. Regulatory moves are going to be impacted. What does that mean? That means that a lot of times rules or regulations are created because a company put out a certain narrative into the zeitgeist, if you will, that then caused policy to change. Some of our small businesses are becoming less competitive. Individual ownership goes down. Increased barriers to industry. So the issue is not whether business should participate in government. Let me get that straight. Business expertise is absolutely essential to economic development and innovation. The issue is whether or not concentrated corporate influence has exceeded healthy democratic balance. Hope y'all heard that. The issue is whether concentrated corporate influence has exceeded healthy democratic balance. See, when policymaking becomes excessively dependent upon large institutional interests, democratic participation weakens because communities lose negotiating power. Local economies lose resilience, and public priorities become increasingly shaped by those with the greatest financial access as opposed to the greatest public need. All right? The future stability of our democratic systems may actually depend upon whether communities are willing to move beyond passive political participation and begin rebuilding the economic and civic structures necessary to influence policy. But in order to get that attention, we have to start thinking about some things. We have to start thinking about parallel systems. We have to start thinking about structural civic engagement, economic decentralization. So the objective is not to just protest. The objective is to use your leverage. See, policy changes when economic behavior, public pressure, institutional participation, and alternative systems begin shifting the balance of power. Okay, so today we're going to get through, we're going to talk about understanding corporate influence in policy making. And tomorrow we're going to talk about some strategies. All right. Corporate influence within policy making it's rarely single dimensional. Okay. It operates through an interconnected web of lobbying networks, campaign financing structures, media influence, political consulting, trade associations, regulatory relationships, legal infrastructure, think tanks, employment systems, economic dependency. See, over time, these systems collectively shape the environment in which policy decisions are made. See, a lot of us like to think that the government or policymakers will see us suffering and then they will make a change. There are so many other influences that go into it that our suffering, our challenges get pushed down on the priority list. This is not new. It has evolved over more than a century because alongside industrial expansion and economic consolidation in the United States, people began to turn to lawmakers to get their way in the business world. So, quick history. During the late 19th century, often referred to as the Gilded Age, industrial monopolies gained extraordinary influence over the American economy through dominance in railroads, oil, steel, banking, and manufacturing. People like John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, they accumulated unprecedented levels of economic power, which allowed their corporations to heavily influence lawmakers, heavily influence labor systems, transportation networks, land development, public infrastructure. Let me break this down. When you have people with massive amounts of wealth, like John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, the government allowed these people to influence policy and laws, to influence wages, labor, how you get paid, to influence education, how to prepare children to go to work into their companies. So adjusting the entire educational system around their efforts. Transportation networks, getting a new train stop put in so that people can go to work and get off right at their campus. Land development. And I'm not saying in every case that there's something completely wrong with this, but when it becomes so influential that the desires of the people get pushed down on the priority list, and the John D. Rockefellers, the Andrew Carnegies, and the J.P. Morgans get a pure say-so above the needs of the people, then we got a problem. Okay. The government tried to put a few things in place. So as industrial consolidation accelerated, so they started creating these big, giant, massive corporations that were just too big to fail. You guys probably remember that conversation, that phrase. I think it was during the Obama administration, too big to fail. There was public concern surrounding this concentrated economic power. So by the early part of the 20th century, lawmakers and citizens began to recognize that this concentration threatened not only the market competition, but our democracy in itself. And this growing concern contributed to the rise of antitrust legislation. We talk about this in the book, The Art and Science of Business. So the Sherman Antitrust Act and later the Clayton Antitrust Act, both of which were designed to limit monopolies or monopolistic practices and preserve competitive markets. If you have not finished The Art and Science of Business, I know how y'all do. Y'all pick the book up, you get your notebook out, you read a couple chapters, and then you put it down. I get it. Finish the book. But what happened, even with these laws in place, corporate influence didn't disappear. It actually evolved. And so throughout the 20th century, institutional influence expanded through increasingly sophisticated mechanisms. What do I mean by that? They just became more sophisticated when it came to being influential. So using lobbying networks, political action committees, you hear a lot of talk about PACs today, industry-funded research organizations, campaign finance networks, concentrated media ownership structures. If you go to buy some media during election time, it'll be really hard for you to get that media buy because all the politicians are buying up them to get their message out. Again, doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing, but where's the balance? And by the 1970s, major corporations dramatically increased organized political spending in response to rising labor movements, environmental regulations, consumer protection laws. So when you had certain labor movements, people were fighting for equal wage and women striving to get hired, anti-discrimination movements, then a lot of these companies went to government and said, I don't want to have to deal with this. And they gave money. And I know it's not supposed to be done, but this is what happens. They gave money to influence how labor laws are shaped. Things like environmental regulations. You literally had, we went through this a lot the last 30 years, where you had a lot of companies that were literally pumping poisonous gases and things like that into the air, into the water. And nobody was doing anything about it. And we're all going, well, don't they see people are getting cancer? People are dying. Look at this environmental stuff. If you saw the show a few months ago, we talked about Acres Homes in Houston, and the brother gave an example of the environmental regulations that are being violated down there in the Acres Home area adjacent to Houston, Texas. And I go, what is the problem? Well, a lot of these companies are influencing government, and they may not be just walking up to your politician and writing a check. That happens. But they have these groups, lobbying firms, these PACs that fund their campaigns. And even though they're not supposed to, they heavily influence policy. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff. There's the Powell Memorandum. We can talk about all of that, but I just want to lay this groundwork for us. There's another thing that you may hear called a revolving door. Corporate influence also operates, and it's commonly called a revolving door, or the revolving door phenomenon, where individuals move between positions within regulatory agencies and industries those agencies oversee. So regulators may later become corporate advisors. So you get a person there in government, and then they don't get reelected, and you say, well, what happened to them? Well, now they're corporate advisors. Now they're a consultant for the very industry that they used to regulate over. Now they're a lobbyist. Now they're an executive at one of the firms. So while corporate leaders may enter public office or administrative agencies responsible for regulating industries over time, at the same time, those regulators also then go into private practice or private industry. So you get this revolving door. So a company may put up a candidate that has experience in their industry and finance the campaign, get them elected. Now their person is in government. And then sometimes when the person finishes being in government, they go back into that same industry. There's other cases where there are regulators who didn't even know anything about, quote unquote, a particular company, or didn't have a relationship with a particular company before they got into office, who then, when they leave office, go into that very industry that they were a regulator over. It happens all the time. So this revolving door is important for us to understand. So policymakers often operate in environments where large corporations are major employers. So policymakers, your government officials, may face direct or indirect pressure to prioritize market stability over the needs of the people. And over time, this dynamic can contribute to a weakened antitrust enforcement environment. Deregulation, de facto deregulation can occur. Increased barriers to small business participation. Procurement inequities. And we wondering why we only get less than 1% of government contracts go to Black people. Don't believe the hype. DEI was not benefiting us. These mechanisms that I've talked about has took us out of that game a long time ago. We receive less than 1% of government contracts. So then other things, tax advantages for large institutions. Even when you start talking about local ownership, you may have municipalities that own everything. It's an interesting thing. I'll tell you something that happens here in Chicago. And this is just real simple in the entertainment industry. Okay, so somebody is in here being a little weird. So we're going to delete their comment. There we go. Joe Blackula says, ASA, yes, ma'am. There was an HBO movie about the housing market crash called Too Big to Fail. Yeah. But let me give you an example of something that happens. And this is something we probably can all relate to. In the entertainment industry, there is oftentimes this thing where people say, well, in order to be successful, you have to leave your town and go to New York or LA, now Atlanta. So if you want to be successful in entertainment, you have to leave. Chicago, as big as we are, the third largest city, has a very small entertainment industry. We are not very effective or as effective as we should be in entertainment. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we do not have a lot of individual ownership of venues. So when you go to New York or LA, if you're a comedian, if you're a singer, an actor, a dancer, there's a lot of places where you can go to perform, increase your visibility, work out your craft. You can create kind of like this little following that's local, right? In Chicago, we don't have as many independently owned facilities where local people can go and sing, dance, and perform. Because the majority of our large venues are owned by the city. And so this directly impacts our influence in the entertainment industry. Because if you're a aspiring rapper, there's not a lot of places where you can go every week to perform. When you hear a lot of the old school comedians talking about coming up in Chicago, you hear them talking about specific clubs. All jokes aside, the Click, but there were just a couple. There was, I forget the one out south where that Dion Cole always talks about. I heard him and Mike Epps talking about how Dion invited Mike Epps out there and there was a big fight and Dion was doing comedy on the bar. Those types of venues are very important to the establishment of an industry. So in Chicago back in the day, you used to have the Regal Theater where people could go for amateur night. And there were places all over the city. This is prior to the 80s, where people could go to perform. It's like that in New York. When you get to New York, there's so many different rooms that you can go and work out your comedy routine. But when corporate regulators begin to own, no, I won't say it that way. Large corporations begin to own all the venues. When municipalities begin to own all the venues, then it becomes very difficult for that small space that has a stage to survive. And so if that small space that has a stage can't survive, then guess what? You have no place to go to perform. And if you have no place to go to perform, then you're going to have to leave the city to find places to work out in. That's just a small example. That's just, we talking about the development of an entertainment industry here in Chicago. It's like you go to New York to go to Broadway. And we got a theater circuit and an entertainment circle here, don't get me wrong, but it is nowhere near as influential as it should be. And that's because of the heavy corporate and government influence on venue spaces. Somebody should do a study on this. So one of the things I'm going to talk about tomorrow, I'm not going to go through the whole ebook, but there are some things that I want to talk about because I have a policy section in this ebook. No, a strategy section in the ebook where we talk about the role of unity and coordinated economic behavior. Because we hear these things, but I don't think we really understand how it impacts policy and how it can be a counter strategy to what's going on that's got us all depressed. We're going to talk about the economic importance of the dollar circulating more than a few hours in our community. Okay, we're going to talk about how food, the growth and control of distribution of food and what we eat is a political strategy. And so we're going to lay that out. We're going to talk about that. Any questions in the chat from anyone? I'm sorry, you guys. We had a weird person who was putting some strange stuff in the chat, so I deleted them. But before we dig into it tomorrow, I wanted to make sure that we understand that what we see going on is heavy corporate influence on government that is driving the movement of our government, which is why it feels so disconnected, because it's not necessarily about our needs, it's about the government needs. And what does the government need? To satisfy the supporters. But y'all know I don't put nothing up here where it's going to seem hopeless. There are strategies and solutions, and we're going to talk about that on this series. And when you go and get the ebook, you will see it, because a healthy market requires competition, but healthy democracies require balance. And when economic influence becomes excessively centralized, democratic participation weakens because communities lose negotiating power. Independent businesses will struggle to compete. This is what's happening now. And policymaking becomes increasingly shaped by those with the greatest financial access rather than the broadest public interest. And so we think we're going to go more into the traditional political participation. Let me give you a little hint. And I know y'all don't want to hear this, but I'm sorry. The reason why we feel hopeless is because we are looking at it and trying to build hope based upon our rugged individualism. This is where cooperative economics comes in. This is where redirecting our spending comes in. This is where examples of the Montgomery bus boycott come in. We were boycotting Target for a minute, and at that point, Target was hurting. I don't know whatever happened, if we still boycotting, if there was any kind of legislation that came as a result of it, any changes that were made. But redirecting influence, creating unity where the algorithms don't expect us to be united, is more powerful than you and I may think. See, a lot of people think participating politically through voting only, but yet saying, well, I'm economically dependent and I'm voting, that's going to be a lot less effective. It's a structural imbalance. See, voting remains one of the most important components of democratic participation, but elections alone often struggle to produce significant structural reform when underlying economic power remains heavily concentrated. I want you guys to think about this. This does not mean that voting lacks importance. It means voting alone may be insufficient. See, when you got economic systems, media systems, lobbying infrastructure, institutional financing networks that are working against you no matter who you vote for, then the strategy has to change. And I think we need to be asking every candidate, how are you going to help us strategize so that we create a parallel system that's more of a safety net for our community? How are you going to help us strategize against the economic system that is controlling certain issues? How are you going to help us strategize against the media systems? How are you going to help us strategize against the lobbying infrastructure, against the super PACs? See, corporate influence persists a lot of times regardless of election cycles. I know a lot of us are like, what? This is too much, but it is what it is. This is where we are. Let me say this. Political systems often respond more rapidly when economic systems are affected. Governments operating within highly centralized economic systems therefore frequently respond not only to political pressure, but also to economic pressure capable of influencing institutional stability. So, how do we collectively make certain moves that will help demonstrate or galvanize power in our community? And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave it to us, and we're going to talk about that. And it's also going to be in the ebook. Because political participation without economic infrastructure leaves our community highly vulnerable to external control. We love to talk about, well, Black people can't unite, and we're not going to unite, and we can't come together. We love to talk about that. Let's shift that conversation towards how can we collectively come together? How do we construct parallel economic infrastructure systems that are capable of reducing our vulnerability? How do we do that? If you need a loan, is there a community organization, a credit union in your community that you can go to help finance your business or to become a safety net for you? Again, think about it this way. If corporations are heavily influencing government, okay? Corporations are heavily influencing government. Corporations are now relying on things like AI and algorithms to make predictions, to create pro formas that their stockholders depend upon. And they ride the market based on these predictions. If we do something very simple and create a shift in the algorithm, you don't got to take the company all the way down. You just create a 5%, 10% shift in revenue. That's going to be enough to influence that company and over time, ultimately influence the policymakers that are tethered to those companies. So all of a sudden, we stop shopping at certain places. All of a sudden, we start redirecting our money in other directions. All of a sudden, we start circulating money within our community longer than a couple of hours. Now we become a force to be reckoned with. Why? Because now you got to pay attention to this company that's this community that's generating millions of dollars that they control. Then there's all these games they play with the real estate, where anything Black owned or Black connected, they try to undervalue. And there's this whole thing that happens in our community where commercial and residential real estate is undervalued, and it stays undervalued. So you can't get a loan to open a business and create a positive cash flow or a positive even pro forma statement to make it make sense. And so now you go in the community, there's no grocery stores, there's no restaurants, and we start crying about food deserts, and we say to the government, give us money for the food deserts. Well, a lot of that started when the real estate in the community was undervalued, and it was undervalued so that then at one point, people who have heavy cash flow can come into that community, buy that property for cash, and then turn it into a business that we're then so thirsty because we haven't had a business in the community, we make them rich overnight. It's a tactic that happens all the time. Or they'll do it with an adjacent neighborhood. They may say, okay, we're going to undervalue this particular neighborhood, but the neighborhood just a few blocks down, we're going to really make it vibrant. We're going to have higher valuations when it comes to appraisals and things like that. And then pretty soon, our business in that community will creep over to this quote unquote lower income neighborhood. And then we'll come in and outprice and push the existing community members out of the neighborhood. You see it all the time. So when you pass by these neighborhoods, you start seeing things closing. You start seeing shops closing. You start seeing businesses shut down. You're going to start to see an undervaluation of the property. And in our community, they're going to undervalue it more than normal. There's so much racism that comes in when it comes to appraisals and valuation of companies. Valuation of companies, valuation of real estate. There's a lot of racism involved. And a lot of it is strategic. Because what they want to do is reduce the value of the property so low that one of them with a cash heavy pocket can come in, gobble it up, and then in turn monetize it. We're going to talk about that, and that's going to be in the ebook. Okay, that's a whole tactic and a whole strategy. I know a lot of us out here think we know real estate, but we really don't know real estate. We just know how to go in and create a contract and maybe sell it. But do you really understand what they're doing when they undervalue your property? When they undervalue that strip mall that's in your community? So now, when you go to try to rent it, it's dilapidated, it's broke down, it's drug infested, people hanging out in the parking lot, and they undervalue it. There's so much of this stuff is just strategic. Very few things nowadays happen organically. And part of our challenge as spiritual people is knowing what's organic and what is constructed. But when you start talking about capitalism and how money and valuations influence behaviors, very, very little is actually organic. When you're looking at something, there's a rule that we use in consulting and in auditing. It's follow the money. Follow the money. And a lot of us are so driven by this mindset, has become so part of our personal operating platform that we function like that too. So when you see us, even at our events, just follow the money. Who's invited has something to do with money. Who's not invited has something to do with money. Who's being pushed out of certain corporate circles and things like that has something to do with money. And who's in the circle oftentimes has something to do with money. This is how this relationship between corporation and policies has corrupted us, because it's imbalanced. All right, y'all. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. This is a lot, and I'm taking my time with it, and I'm going a little slower than what we normally would go, just so that we get it and we understand it. I have a couple commercials I'm going to show you before I go. I want you to support this kind of work that we are doing. And we've got some really interesting things coming up this summer. I'm prepping and priming y'all for it. And I'm going to tell you, go and register your commemorative Elijah coin so that you can be in the communication loop and in the participation network. And why am I saying that? Because there's so much propaganda out here that we've reduced a lot of our communication to private networks, especially the planning related stuff. So between haters and negative influencers, we're taking a little bit of a different approach to notifications about upcoming events, participation in upcoming events. And there will be, public announcements, but it'll be after the establishment of certain things. I'll leave it at that. So thank you, dress code. Thank you, Brother Ronald. Thank you, Joe Blackula. Thanks, Mom. Thanks everybody for being in the chat. I see y'all, and those that decided not to participate. Support the movement, support the network. If you enjoy getting information like this, and there's some moves that I'm making, and I know they have been super quiet, and you're like, what's going on? Trust me when I tell you that there is a lot happening. Okay. And you'll see later why we've been a little bit quiet over here on this front. Okay, family. There's a lot more I could say. I'm going to leave it at that. Tune in tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. right here. We're going to continue this conversation. We're going to go over some strategies, and we're going to parallel those strategies with what we were given as instructions from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and how in his magnificent wisdom, he literally telegraphed what is happening right now here today. And not only did he telegraph it, he gave us antidotes. And so we're going to talk about that. Don't go anywhere. I got 2 commercials to show you. Hope that you would support. Ways to support are going across the bottom of the screen. We got a lot of events we're working on, and we really, really, really need your support. So stay on, stay tuned, and we'll see you all tomorrow morning. Remember, accept your own and be yourself.